Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
This directly. Can you hear me, Reed?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. Sorry, I'm a little late.
Oh, no, you're fine. We've been talking about some other things in the meantime. I was actually just starting to bring up the trucker convoy a little bit, kind of lead into it here. So you got good timing, huh?
Perfect.
So what I was just more or less touching on, piggybacking off of Russia, condemning Putin for what he just did today. And if you want to touch on that a little bit, we can. So we've more or less been talking about up to this point. But kind of segueing back to what's been going on with the trucker convoy up in Canada. I mean, the shit that Trudeau did to those truckers is disgusting. They did not deserve that. They certainly did not deserve to be branded as terrorists, to have their bank accounts frozen, to be hacked by that goofball up there that calls himself a cyber terrorist or whatever, and have all the people that donated to him have their information doxed. I mean, it was a fucking mess, and it really should not have happened. But there's talks of potentially some organization on that here. I'm starting to see a little bit more of, but I mean, give me your thoughts, man. What do you think about how this convoy broke down in Canada and what happened with it?
Well, I think, the people in Canada were pushed way beyond their limits. It's basically been like Manhattan has been down here, just nationwide up there. Universal restrictions. You can't ride a bus. You can't take a domestic flight. You can't eat in a restaurant. You can't go out to the movies. You can't do basically anything in civilized life if you don't have a vaccine passport. And so then the straw that broke the camel's back was they were going to require truckers crossing from from Canada into the United States. They're going to require them to have vaccine passports as well. And so then the truckers said, you know what, we're done with this. And actually, we're not just protesting this latest mandate, but we're also protesting all the mandates you've put on the country. And we're done. Like you got to lift all these restrictions. And then we'll go home. So then they, convoyed over to Ottawa, and they also went to some capital cities and several provinces too. I haven't actually heard how those have shaken out. I don't know what's going on with those, right. But yeah, the one in Ottawa, they were there for like almost 2 weeks, and then the government really started cracking down, and then they eventually started arresting people, towing trucks, throwing people in prison, freezing bank accounts. And not just protesters, but if you were donating to the protesters, they also were going to come after you. It was, it's literal fascism when the government and corporations start working together to suppress the people, which is what happened. The government asked GoFundMe to stop funding the protests. And so GoFundMe stopped, and then they've been using the banks to freeze people's accounts. And it's pretty terrifying stuff. So it's just funny that all these liberals, they're so against fascism and authoritarianism, but then that's exactly what they've been using. It was so funny when Trudeau was condemning Putin for authoritarianism the other day. It was just like, dude, have you ever done an ounce of self-reflection before? Because you are the pot calling the kettle black, and you've been burned hard.
Yeah. I mean, he literally just came off of, again, freezing people's bank accounts and declaring people terrorists and things like that. And we had riots a little over a year ago that were burning up stores, and the media covered that as, fiery, but mostly peaceful. Right. And then these guys are just sitting out there, not harming anyone. Yeah, they're tying up the streets. I guess you could blame that. I mean, those are big damn trucks. They're going to tie up the streets, but they're not out there harming businesses. They're not out there trying to burn anything down. And look at how that was covered. And to me, that really, when I saw that, it made me start to reevaluate a lot of those protests from last year. I'll be honest with you, because at the time I felt like these people are idiots. But then I started thinking, I was like, I heard all those stories about people coming in from out of town to those protests, right? Like people that were not local to that community. And a part of me just started to wonder, Now, and this is speculation on my part, but the same way just some guy randomly turned up in the middle of the Freedom Convoy with, a swastika flag, and then there's a Confederate flag, and I'm like,
well, did you see that swastika flag? Like, it wasn't like he was just flying a swastika. It said Trudeau on it. It was obviously implying that Trudeau is a Nazi. It wasn't an advocacy for the Third Reich or something. It's
right.
Context matters. But yeah,
well,
go ahead. I'll let you finish your point.
Well, I was going to say that's actually ironic because there was a little bit that came up where I forget the lady who had something to say about Trudeau in Parliament not long ago. But he literally said like they could keep standing with the Nazis or whatever. And she was actually a lady of Jewish descent. And there was some pictures that came out where he actually was posing for photographs with former Nazis from years ago. So,
God. Yeah, no, it's, I mean, the guy with the Confederate flag, that picture was taken by Justin Trudeau's personal photographer, I think.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of suspicious right there. But first of all, so both of those examples, let's say it is organic. The guy with the swastika, like I said, it's not just a swastika. It's an implication that Trudeau is acting like a fascist. And then the Confederate flag, I mean, that's a symbol of secession. And that's something that a lot of Western Canadians are talking about right now. And what's the most, well-known symbolism of secession? The Confederate flag, Yeah. And the funny thing is that's not even actually the Confederate flag. That's just their battle flag. So they can distinguish it from the United States flag. And, because their flag is actually like 3 bars with a circle of stars representing the states that seceded or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it's ridiculous, man. I mean, I watched tons and tons of videos of these protesters. I didn't see any videos of property destruction. I saw, all different types of people from different walks of life. People, not that I care, but they were people of different color. There were Black people, white people, First Nation people, which is what the Canadians call the natives there. There were Asian. I mean, it's just, so the idea that it was some white supremacist movement is ridiculous. And then a lot of the people were actually already vaccinated. They were just against mandating it. So, any accusations that this was somehow some like anti-science thing or some white supremacist thing is just ridiculous.
Yeah, well, I mean, at this stage in the game, we know who the people are that are anti-science, and I don't believe it's the truckers. It's the people who keep taking money from big pharma to do their bidding and keep telling you to do things even when the science doesn't start to line up with anymore. And slowly but surely, they're starting to admit a little bit more and a little bit more over time, but going back to what I was saying a minute ago, like now I got to look back at some of these protests like post George Floyd and stuff. And so a lot of this where the Black Lives Matter protests went awry. And I say, well, did that happen organically, or were there outside actors that were literally almost paid to go in there and stir up all that shit just so the media could make it like report on it in a way that to everyone's eyes, it's like, well, that's bullshit. Like fiery, but mostly peaceful, and they're burning a fucking town down. Well, the people who are pro Black Lives Matter, obviously, are going to say, well, they weren't with us. They were this, they were that. To everyone that's kind of sitting on the fence, it then gives them the reason to criticize, to the people that got their stores burned down. They hate what happened. And if these people are being framed as being among them, in other words, it's like a tool used to literally keep the divide going. You know what I mean? So whereas, this was something where there wasn't a peaceful protest, and it didn't wind up really being successful for very much. It just really destroyed communities in a lot of ways, but nothing came of it. And the media reported it like, hey, everything's fine here. And shit's literally burning down. Stores are getting vandalized and raided. People are getting shot. I mean, what the fuck? But that's all fine. Chaz, look how the fuck, like when the whole Chop Chaz shit like hit Seattle, right? or wherever it was out there in the Northwest. I think it was Seattle, but wherever it was at, when they set that shit up, you got the mayor or whatever saying like, "Oh, there's going to be a summer of love or some shit," you know. And the police didn't want to step in, and they let them have their little experiment. But of course, those people were not well equipped to try to set up camp to survive on their own. It wound up folding. But I mean, you look at how that was covered, and obviously nothing really came from it. There was nothing there that changed anything for the long haul. But these truckers were well prepared, well equipped. They were organized. This had potential to really make a statement. And they realized there was a threat because the truckers are so, and you're gonna be able to testify to this, Reed. I mean, I've had truckers in my family, so I know what it is. Truckers are essential to your everyday life. Okay, now, workers are in a lot of ways too, but the truckers move the stuff from point A to point B to point C on down the line. If they stop moving, you got problems. You got big problems. That's a lot of why you got this whole supply chain shortage and stuff today. Not to mention a lot of things that the governments have already been doing to truckers over the years to hurt the ways they made money. You know, one of the things that pissed my dad off more than anything was the e-log shit that they imposed. It really
I'm not a fan either.
Do what?
I'm not a fan of those either. The big thing about the e-logs, a lot of people are misunderstanding. The laws didn't really change. But now it's impossible to use common sense because once you're 1 second over, you're done. So, 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there, you can't fudge it. So if you run into traffic, some of the trucks like go into limp mode. It depends on what type of setup you have. Mine doesn't do that, but some of the trucks, they'll go into limp mode if you go over time. What if you run into traffic for 15 minutes that you weren't expecting and you're almost to your destination? But the thing that I find interesting about the Black Lives Matter protests and the Chaz thing versus the trucker thing is the truckers, you're right, they are organized and they were serious. But the biggest thing is they had a very clear message. They were very explicit about what they wanted. If you do these things, we will go home. Right. Now, the Black Lives Matter and the Chaz thing, it got co-opted basically because if you had thousands of people go to their town halls or go to Capitol Hill and say, we are not leaving until you end qualified immunity, civil asset forfeiture, and no-knock raids. Like, let's just say those three things right there. We're not leaving until you do that. And we know this is what we want. We know you have the power to do it. I don't think you would have seen the same love from the media that they got. The love they got was because it was so distracted. It got turned into a race war, into everybody hates black people. And then property destruction ensued and all this stuff. And so then you have pictures of politicians who can march in a Black Lives Matter parade and they can kneel on the floor of the House, but they're not actually going to do anything to change fix the problem. And that's what scares them when you show up and you want them to fix the problem. And that's what the truckers are doing. Like, they showed up and they're like, you fix this right now. It's, I don't know. It's been disheartening to see how that has turned out. I'm not sure that it was a overall positive effect. I mean, I know some provinces are starting to fast track their expiration of, heavy restrictions, but I think that might have been happening anyways. So, I don't know. I'm nervous about what'll happen in DC this next coming weekend. And I do support the truckers. I stand behind them. I am a trucker, and I'm certainly not going to side with the government over the truckers, but I just want them to be very smart about what they're doing and be very clear about what they want. And I would recommend to them, if the US starts pulling the same shit that Canada did, then just go home and don't deliver anything to Washington, D.C. If you can effectively block off Washington, D.C. until they knock it off, I wish that there had been more of an effort to do that in Ottawa instead, because now there are people in prison and trucks impounded and everything. And I'm not sure anything really got done. You're not breaking the law if you don't go to DC, if you won't drive stuff in there. So if the government decides to get violent about this, which it looks like they're actually going to deploy the National Guard to meet the trucker convoy. I would not recommend like an open fight against the U.S. government. I don't think that's going to end well. So just, if we have to shift tactics, then just boycott D.C. and not just D.C., but also San Francisco, Los Angeles, Seattle, anywhere where they're still doing any of this stuff. Just say, we're not bringing you anything until you self-adjust and, get rid of this crap.
Yeah. That I saw somebody say that on Twitter, and I'd personally been thinking the same thing. And I actually made a video when you first talked about doing a Freedom Convoy here. You didn't seem to be too enthused with the idea because you felt the truckers would wind up taking a lot of blame from the way the media would cover it and stuff, right? Because shelves would dry up and things of that nature. And I agree with you on that. The way the media is going to cover it, they're going to make these truckers out to be an ass, no doubt about it. But the thing is, you can, just like you said, if all the truckers all across the country just went on strike and nothing got delivered, there are a lot of states that don't do all this over the top BS who are going to suffer as a result of it as well.
Right.
Take the places that are just out of their minds with these mandates and vaccine passports and things, and say, okay, we're not going to deliver to you. We're just not going to do it. We're going on a boycott, and we will not haul stuff to your towns. We're going to park our rigs. And if you're, owner operator, you can do that. You own your rig. It's yours. You don't have to move the stuff if you don't want to. You got the ability to take loads that you want to take. So there's the opportunity to do that. And as far as, me and you were actually kind of talking about this yesterday because you put out a tweet, the lyrics to the old C.W. McCall Convoy song, right? And how they're literally starting to almost play out in real time. And I told you, I was like, right around the time you texted me yesterday, I was actually in the middle of watching the movie Convoy, which I hadn't watched in a very long time. But hey, don't try to take on the military with those rigs, okay?
Yeah.
Because, in the song, it had a little bit of a different ending than it had in the movie. If you've ever watched the movie,
the movie is a little more representative of what would actually happen, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. He the guy that was driving, he wound up surviving, but that black Mac got blown straight up in the air. So, I mean, that's what's going to happen. You don't want to take it to that, point. I don't want to see no one go to jail. I don't want to see anyone in prison. I don't want to see anyone have their lives ruined. As I said, though, when you do have revolutions, there's going to be casualties as a result of it. No one's ever fought for freedom and the group came away from it unscathed. And I don't want to see it happen. So the best thing to do is do something that's going to have, and this is my take here, do something that's going to produce results, but don't put yourself in a risk or a danger when you don't have to.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you can send a strong message just by parking your rig and saying, I'm not moving anything into California, I'm not moving anything up to New York until these places start backing off on the BS, and you don't have to literally occupy streets and break laws to do it, and you can still send a strong message, hey, that to me, that just seems like an overall better option.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you don't even have to park your rig. You can still make money, still drive to Alabama and Utah and even into California. Like I think I'm going into California next week. There's it's very different city by city, town by town, county by county. I'm not sure how California is doing it, but I brought a machine to California like a month and a half ago, and I didn't have to wear a mask anywhere I went, didn't have to show proof of vaccination. So basically, if you're if you're in an inner city where they're requiring that stuff and you're patronizing them, that's where I think, which doesn't really happen with my job much. I mean, I sometimes take something like downtown Salt Lake City, but usually I'm not bringing anything into a city proper. It's usually somewhere out in the suburbs where a heavy equipment depot is or something like that. But especially for the guys who are like hauling food and more immediately needed supplies, gas, stuff like that, they're the ones who have the real power, because once you don't have that type of stuff for a few days, like things get pretty desperate. So, yeah, I would, I think it's just got to be a lot more targeted here than it was. And I mean, in Canada, it was very targeted and very good. Right. And here it's got to be even more so, because it's not like Canada. It's not like, everything has been restricted. Everybody's under the same rules. If you're right, it differs state to state. Things are quite a bit different here.
Yeah, I agree. One thing I want to get your opinion on here real quick, because I would say this is probably the biggest thing that worries me now. I got to start by saying this. There's no doubt in my mind that if they ever get to the point that they can, they're going to do this anyways. And I hate to say it, but, automation has replaced as many people as it could over the years. And I don't know. I mean, like, I've heard the rumors about like these self-driving 18-wheelers. I know this. I don't want to be on the road around those damn things anytime soon. I'll just be entirely honest with you. That the thought of that scares the shit out of me, because something that damn big with no one physically driving to control it, if something goes haywire, that could go real bad real quick. So that thought terrifies me. But we've heard about them. We know they're in the works. And if these trucker protests work, and the people in charge realize just how much leverage really workers have, but truckers in particular, how much leverage they have, how do you feel? Do you think that they would obviously like really just try to turn up that pressure to start eliminating as much truckers as they can with these self-driving things if they can get them out there?
I don't know. Like, I'm skeptical of the self-driving truck thing. At least replacing drivers, I think that's a long ways out, because
right.
There's so much more to being a truck driver than just driving the truck. Like, what if you blow a tire? What if your load starts coming loose?
Right.
What if you're in inclement weather? What if you're in a weird spot where the human element is required? Like, you have to move over and then a truck has to get out of your way in order for you to back up, or, there's so much there. And then especially if you're a delivery driver, if you're just delivering stuff to stores all the time, like
right,
that takes a lot of human element, just driving to figure out where you can park in the parking lot where you're not in anyone's way. And then you got to unload all the product, bring it into the store. And then there's logging trucks like that, involves a lot more than just driving. There's dump trucks. There's just like, I think you could see it happen on a small scale in some places. Like, I think you could see, on I-10 in Arizona, maybe like they could try to prototype some of these trucks running from loading dock to loading dock just on Interstate 10, where there's no, bad weather. There aren't a lot of hills there, and maybe they could like actually completely get rid of the driver in that scenario. But even in that scenario, I think for a while, what they're going to want to do is still have a driver in the truck in case something happens, but you'll basically be able to put it on autopilot. So you won't have to be paying, super close attention all the time. You can just kind of, get the truck on the interstate or the highway or whatever, and then just kind of sit back and let it do its thing. Obviously, that would be better for the elites if there were no truck drivers, if it were all automated. But I think technology is still pretty limiting, and who knows, maybe in the next 10 years they'll figure some crazy technology out that just boggles the mind. But at least at the current trajectory, I don't think truck drivers will cease to exist in my lifetime, and I'm pretty young, so I don't know.
That's that was my thing. I wanted to get your perspective on it. I'm of the opinion if they could, they would. but I just don't know that it's really that feasible right now. A lot of my speculation, some of them you just brought up there point wise, I'm just like, there's more to it than just driving and parking the truck. There's the loading, there's the unloading, there's a lot of other elements like you brought up. I'm just like, I don't know if they're gonna be able to pull it off, but I feel like if this is successful, they'll try to find as many routes as they can to try and make it happen. So, sorry, I'm not really looking at the camera much there. I'm going through. Apparently, I got some bots showing up in the chat, so I was blocking some bots there. but yeah, man. I mean, turning back to something else here real quick, because I know you were talking about the whole the Russian invasion of Ukraine a little bit earlier today.
Yeah.
I think me and you were both kind of the same opinion. I didn't expect it to get to this. I really did.
I was wrong, man.
Well, hey, it happens to the best of us, man.
Yeah,
You're right all the time.
I don't really blame myself for being wrong that much because, I mean, you go through history, like the WMDs in Iraq, that was a lie. Assad gassing hundreds of thousands of his own people, that was a lie. The Gulf of Tonkin torpedoes that was made up. It was literally made up. You can go look at it now. Like, they fully admit that no torpedoes existed, and they use that as an excuse to go into Vietnam. There was no Spanish mine that blew up the Maine. Like, that was made up. I mean, just everything that has gotten us into a war has been made up. And then on top of that, you add everything with COVID over the last 2 years. Not that COVID was made up. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying they lied a lot about how to deal with it, with the vaccines, whether or not it stops the spread, or, whether it was made in a lab or any of these things. Like, you weren't allowed to talk about it. The economy. Like, I shared a video of you on my show with Dave and Mike when we were talking about inflation back in summer of 2020. And it's not like I'm some economic genius. And I was saying, like, we're printing all this money off right now, but just watch, within a couple of years, it's going to go through the roof. Sure enough, that happens. And they've been gaslighting us into oblivion, acting like they didn't have any idea this was going to happen or whatever. So I just don't trust the government at all, but specifically the foreign policy establishment. Whenever they say something, I'm just like, yeah, right. Like, I don't believe you. So this stuff go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, it's what we learned in elementary school, the boy that cried wolf. Okay. Yeah. They've sat here and cried wolf for over 50 years about all kinds of shit. And the majority of it has been nothing but lies, straight BS. You brought up Gulf of Tonkin incident, why we went into Vietnam. One you left out was Daddy Bush and the Gulf War.
Yep.
Why they wanted to go out into Iraq the first time? Because they got the little girl to testify in front of Congress that she saw Iraqi soldiers yanking babies out of incubators.
Yep.
Turned out she's like the Kuwaiti ambassador's daughter or something like that, right? So, I mean, they have just gaslit us for so long that there are so many people. Now, don't get me wrong. There's still plenty of sheep out there, too. If the news said it, it's got to be true. If they read it online, it's the truth, right? There's still plenty of those folks out there. But there's also enough of us at this point that we've seen them lie about this so much because they want to beat a war drum for the military-industrial complex that when we hear it, we're like, yeah, it don't sound right to me. I don't think nothing's going to happen. So, yeah, I'm like you. I don't feel guilty about being wrong. I don't like what's happening, but
here's the other thing with it. Like, I mean, there's that pretext of distrust, but on top of that, we've been pushing Russia around like crazy for the last couple decades.
Exactly.
And they've really done basically nothing in response. They did take the Crimea Peninsula in 2014, but that was after we couped the government of Ukraine, and then they tried
neo-Nazis.
Yeah, we backed some neo-Nazis in Ukraine to overthrow the democratically elected pro-Russia government, and then the government we installed try to kick Russia out of their only warm water port in Sevastopol, which is on the Crimea Peninsula. And so then Putin was like, you know what? Fuck you. Crimea is ours now. And then Donetsk and I forget I keep trying to remember the names of these two provinces in the Donbass.
Lunsk or something like that, right?
Luhansk. That's it. Luhansk and Donetsk are two provinces in the Donbass region, which border Russia. And after Crimea joined Russia, those two provinces also held a referendum and voted to join Russia. And Putin said no.
Exactly.
Back in I think that was 2015.
Yeah.
And so, like, you have all these lies from the United States government, and then on top of that, Putin's been incredibly reserved, in my opinion, for, as far as response goes to what we've done. And then they've been talking about this since November, like it was the Russians were going to invade the next day. They've been jamming it up for months. So yeah, like the last couple of weeks, I was not bullshitting when I thought that was a straight up lie. And then, Scott Horton came on my show and he said it was a lie. Dave Smith was saying it was a lie. Lots of people that I, tend to agree with, they were all saying it was a lie. So you put all three of those factors together and I was like, yeah, there's no. And then on top of that, last week on Wednesday, they were saying Ukraine is going to get invaded by Russia on Wednesday. Wednesday rolls around, Ukraine doesn't get invaded.
It doesn't happen.
I was just like, I do not believe any of this anymore. I mean, this is all just jammed up. And then Russia even started pulling its troops away from the border of Ukraine. And I was like, wow, like, yeah, this was literally all a lie. And then, no. So then Putin moves into Luhansk and Donetsk, which just doing that wasn't enough to alarm me a lot because they're technically independent from Ukraine, sort of, even though they're almost like Canada and England, like they respect the crown, but they're not really like they have a lot of autonomy and a lot of independence. And there were no Ukrainian forces in those provinces. So that on its own, it was certainly aggressive, but it wasn't violent at all. So I was like, it makes me uncomfortable, but I'm still not convinced. And then last night, man, he full on attacked Ukraine. And it's just like, all right, I got that wrong. Like, I really did not think that was going to happen. I'm still sort of skeptical as to whether or not that was the plan all along. I feel like maybe he felt pressured because, I mean, we were massing thousands of troops on the Polish border of Ukraine. And, we hadn't made really strong assurances that Ukraine would not join NATO. We weren't keeping an open line of communication with them that well. I mean, we were sort of negotiating with them, but it was a very stiff-arm negotiation.
Yep. Well, and the other thing too is I'm pretty sure didn't they shut down the Nord Stream 2 after he first went into the Donbass region?
Yeah, and then we sanctioned the shit out of him too.
Yeah.
We said, like, you can't be part of international banking anymore. And then after that, he launched an invasion into Ukraine. So, I do want to point out that I detest what he's just done. Like,
absolutely, yeah.
I mean, I've made a lot of jokes on Twitter and stuff because that's what I do. But in all seriousness, like, invading another country, I don't care who you are. I mean, any U.S. politician who wants to criticize Russia can shut the fuck up because, you need to remove the log from your own eye before you take the speck out of your neighbor's eye. But as an independent citizen who's anti-war, I can unequivocally say, like, what he's doing sucks and he's going to kill innocent people. And I heard, like, he's not letting anyone from the age of 16 to 35 who are men leave the country or something like that. And I don't know what type of acts of aggression he's going to carry out on the Ukrainian people. I hope that the propaganda we've heard is false. And I still kind of think it is, although I'm a little bit second guessing myself just because I did, I missed this one. I called it wrong. But I still think he's being a little bit careful, even though this was a really ballsy move by him. It has so far, at least from what I've seen, been incredibly targeted toward military installations. I haven't seen any evidence of, executions of civilians or anything like that. And I think he's going to want to be cautious moving forward with how he treats the people of Ukraine, just because this was all, I mean, he's already, I feel like the world might have kind of been on his side 3 days ago, because it is an aggressive move by the United States to just, start piling up. I mean, he was massing troops, kind of near the border of Ukraine, but they were in his own country. It was in Russia. When Americans start moving troops to Poland, that's like, whoa, that's like if Chinese troops were being massed in Guatemala on the other side of the Mexican border. It would be like, whoa, what are you guys doing here? So I think the aggression was 100% on our side until he did this. And so, yeah, he fucked up. He's a war criminal, for doing this, just like we are. And yeah, I mean, there's no good people there's no good side anymore. Like, I mean, you got two aggressing sides, and it just sucks. I feel for the innocent people in Ukraine, because, we did back neo-Nazis in 2014, but it's not like every person in Ukraine is a Nazi or something. There are a lot of innocent people who get hurt. So I don't know. I just hope this gets resolved peacefully and we backtrack and things clear up. But
I agree. What you just said about him being a war criminal, it goes back. I think Alan Myron said it really good earlier in the show. There's blame on Biden, there's blame on Zelensky, and there's blame on Putin. And two other names I'll throw in there. There's blame on Obama and Trump too.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Like when you talk about the U.S. aggression, going back to that to the Nord Stream 2, it really, and Kim Iverson, I thought, as I said earlier, I thought she did a real good piece on exposing this, is that with that pipeline going through, they'd be providing Europe with like 80% of the natural gas, right?
Yeah.
So it's like we don't want them to get that power, so we're going to just keep poking the fucking bear, to antagonize and try to keep Europe under our thumb for our own empire purposes, right? Yeah. I mean, and look where that's gotten us in the long scheme of things. And I'm not even convinced that Putin is really that opposed to NATO. Well, he might be now, but it's like, she pointed out, at one point in time, he asked to join NATO. They didn't allow him to join NATO when he asked. And so it's like, okay, well, if you don't want me to join, you don't want me to try to be part of this European community over here, then yeah, I want you to honor the deal. Stop trying to push that shit closer to my borders if you don't want me to be part of it. Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yes, it's been move after move to antagonize him. And, now what we got to, I hate to put this, but what we got to wait on and see now is he really doing what he says he's going to do? And that's just try to demilitarize the country and attack, the arms, or is he going to continue after that and try to basically seize the whole country now that he started? I mean,
yeah, I mean, he said demilitarize and denazify, which I find interesting that he said that. And it is funny, like, you're seeing the mainstream media try to debunk that. And it's like, So for those who don't know, the Azov battalion is a remnant of the Waffen SS that still exists in Ukraine. So when we say neo-Nazis, we don't mean like Christopher Cantwell basement dwelling morons. We mean like, descendants of like actual Third Reich, World War II, Hitler Nazis. And they don't hold a majority in the government there anymore. So it's not like they're running Ukraine, but they certainly, I think they're the most centralized, Nazi power in the world, probably, that it exists in Ukraine. They're not they're not the dominant party anymore, but they're still, I think, the most organized that Nazis are anywhere in the world. So it definitely exists. Like Putin, if you watch this, if you want to really be based, like, just go in there and demilitarize and execute the Azov battalion and then just leave and prove everybody wrong, Yeah. But it's a good thing you're moving out of that studio.
But taking the decorations down on the way out.
But I tend to not believe him that he's really just there to do that. I mean, this is Putin. It's like Biden saying, it's like, I mean, we forget that Russia is also a government and that Putin is also a head of state, and that government is just every bit as corrupt as our government is. So even if he does like demilitarize and denazify and actually doesn't occupy and still leaves, like you can bet the people who are going to be left in power are certainly going to be Russian puppets. So instead of being like a United States puppet government, it's going to be a Russian puppet government, which I don't care. Like I don't know why the United States cares who's running the government in Ukraine. Like, I mean, this has nothing to do with our national security whatsoever.
Just more of our pissing contest is really all it comes down to.
Yeah, exactly.
And a couple of things. I want to point this out. Like you talked about all the people who were talking about like authoritarianism here. It comes back to something I forgot to bring up when we were talking about Canada and the truckers. Me and you talked about this personally. All the people who were trying to sing praises to folks like Jim Jordan for speaking out about that crap. And he voted for the Patriot Act that allows him to do the very same shit to the American people. So if these truckers get branded terrorists in this protest, the same exact thing can happen to them. And these guys have been voting for this time after time after time while bitching about another country doing it. And I just wanted to throw that out there real quick. But focusing on Canada and what you brought up, the Azov, they're literally like when the irony of Trudeau saying that the Conservative Party in Canada is standing with Nazis, and this guy was building, vehicles and sending them to Ukraine for their military that wind up getting stamped with the Azov logo. So you're literally building vehicles for what's leftovers of Third Reich Nazis that their descendants, as you put it, are in power in Ukraine. I mean, and like you said, we're not talking about the basement dwellers here. We're talking about descendants of the same folks that fled Germany after World War II and took up in Argentina, wasn't it? So, yeah, these are descendants of those Nazis, okay? And the fact you're going to sit there and call a Jewish woman in Parliament a Nazi sympathizer or supporter or whatever, and your country is building vehicles for the military and arming the military in a country that's literally being ran by neo-Nazis. That's a fucking irony you couldn't make up, honestly. I mean, it's so ridiculous. But yeah, I'm hoping that maybe Putin is saying, what he feels at this point. I'm kind of like you. I'm hesitant to believe it necessarily at this point. But, at the end of the day, I want to see as little loss of life as possible. I hope this thing works itself out, because right now this is chaos, and people are going to start feeling it. And then if it gets too out of hand, I would not be surprised to see the U.S. not continue to get involved some way, shape, or form. And that's when shit's going to get real dicey if that happens.
All I can say is we have been exonerated in our support of Tulsi Gabbard in 2020, because she has been 100% correct about all of this. And she's been on Fox News like every other day talking about it for the last couple of weeks. And everything, I mean, I disagree with her on some stuff in different areas, but everything she has said about this is 100% correct. And I was saying this on my channel today. I would even rather have Donald Trump in there right now, to be honest. And I have not thought that, I mean, like, Biden sucks, but I've never thought like, wow, I really wish we had Trump back. I never really have. Until like last night and this morning, I was like, you know what? And it's not because Trump is some benevolent dude or he's like really deep character. It's just he's a tough guy, strong man type of figure. And he knows how to talk to Putin. He knows how to talk to Kim Jong-un. I mean, he doesn't know how to deal with like a lot of European heads of state. Like, he was pretty awkward with that. But he is set up for talking to these types of leaders. And
he's got that brash attitude that, as you put it, I think in some cases can do well with handling someone like a Putin, but then you get him in front of Emmanuel Macron, he gives him the 5-minute handshake, yanking him around. So.
Yeah. I mean, and it backfires too. You also have him dealing with like Netanyahu and Mohammed bin Salman, and those guys would kiss his ass, and he'd be like, "Oh, I love these people, they're amazing," and you'd give them whatever they want, weapons deals or aid or whatever. So
you bring that up, and that's actually something that I brought up with Alan Myron when I had him on a little bit earlier. Was I said, this idea that we couldn't have tried to be a little bit more cooperative with Russia. Oh, because they're a bad actor. Well, what the fuck? We deal with Saudi Arabia and Israel and all these other fucked up countries all the time.
Dude, another note on Saudi Arabia and Israel. So many people are worried that Putin is going to commit some sort of genocide. And first of all, I find that highly unlikely. I can't imagine that he would actually do that. But even if he does, we're talking about an adversary of the United States. We don't support Russia. Your tax dollars do not support Russia. Our military, our media system, none of it, builds up Russia. However, your tax dollars do support Saudi Arabia and Israel, and both of those countries are committing genocides right now. The Israelis have been ethnically cleansing the Palestinians for decades, and the Saudis have been genociding the Houthis in Yemen. I think since 2014, somewhere right around there, 2013, 2014. So we're coming up on a decade almost. And the numbers of people who've been starved to death in Yemen, I've heard the estimates are like 200,000 or 300,000, but a lot of experts that I know think that the numbers are really going to be around 1 million whenever we actually find out how many are dead. So our country supports a regime that has murdered 1 million people, and then another one that's consistently murdering people and removing them from their houses and bulldozing their neighborhoods and everything. And so with the mindset of remove the log from your own eye before you take the speck from your neighbor's eye, don't you care more about what the regimes that your tax dollars are supporting are doing? Because I sure do.
Exactly.
I care the most about what the United States government is doing, but after that, it's certainly the regimes that we're propping up and that we're giving tons of money to. The same goes for like China or Cuba. You see so many people so hawkish on China and so hawkish on Cuba, and I'm not. And they think that makes me some sort of China apologist or Cuba apologist. And believe me, I'm not. I do not like the Cuban government, and I do not like the Chinese government. I think what the Chinese government is doing to the Uyghurs is terrible. But we don't support the Chinese government. We don't support the Cuban government. They're also adversaries of the United States. So before I start trying to tell them how they need to behave, we need to get our own house in order. And we've got a lot of problems. So,
yeah, I completely agree. Well, we're coming up about 2 hours and 20 minutes here. So I want to thank you for taking the time to stop by tonight. Got to give the man a shout out here because I said this is what I wanted to do with the stream tonight. I had invited 3 guests on. Franco wasn't able to make it again. Hope everything's okay with him. He said he had an emergency come up. So, thoughts and prayers are with Franco there. Hope he's doing well. But, you, Franco, and Alan Myron have all been, really good friends that have helped me out in different ways ever since I started this channel. You've had me on your show multiple times. I've had you over on this show a few times. And I really, I consider you a good friend. I thank you for all the stuff that you've done to help me out so far. So we're going to, wrap up here. Definitely go check out Reed at the Naturalist Capitalist. He's got great work over there. Channel's growing like wildfire here lately. You just crossed 8,000. You're almost like halfway to 9 now, last I looked or something?
Yeah, I just hit 8,500 today. So it'll be 2 years since I put out my first episode on I think May 20th. So I'm trying to hit 10,000 by the time I hit my 2-year anniversary. That would be great. Yeah. So yeah, go give me a follow on YouTube. Odyssey, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. That's all under the Naturalist Capitalist. Then you can find me, and on Facebook as the Naturalist Capitalist. And then you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Gab, Getter, Float as Reed Coverdale.
Yeah, definitely go check him out. Give him the subscribe on YouTube. Give him a follow over on Twitter. One of these days, maybe we can get you over on Rockfin too, man. You know.
Yeah, I've been approved for Rockfin. I just haven't had time to set it up. I've been, I wasn't expecting a trucker revolution to take off and set the world free and to end up on Fox News and everything. So things have just been insane the last couple of weeks. So
I understand, man. You've had a lot going on. So, again, I want to thank you for stopping by. And I'll definitely have to get you back on the show some point once I get the whole new studio and everything set up. But I appreciate you coming on, Reed, and I hope you'll, come back on pretty soon. And I hope you're doing well out there, man.
Yeah, same to you, man. And once you get your new studio set up, we'll have to get you on my show again so you can show it off to everybody.
All right, man. You take care. Have a good night.
All right, man.
All right, so wrapping everything up here before I close out for the night. I've had one more chat come in. I'm going to read off here real quick. It's going to take a unified masses to get any real change. That is why they absolutely need to keep the masses divided. Yeah, strategy. George Carlin said it best. They don't want critical thinkers. They want obedient workers. And the other thing is to keep the two-party system in power, keep them divided into those two parties. You can do that. You got a pretty good chance at maintaining the power there. So with that, we're going to start wrapping everything up here. I have officially reached the end of the live stream here. We've had a lot of great guests on the day, people who've been very supportive of the Lone Wolf podcast in the 2 years plus that the Lone Wolf podcast has been around. Without the help of a lot of these guys, I don't know that I would have ever gotten the exposure I've gotten up to this point. The algorithm certainly hadn't been friendly to the Lone Wolf podcast. These guys, not going to name who's done what, but some promoted me on social media. Others have just been adamant watchers and supporters. Others, they've had me on their shows. One even helped me out with getting onto the Rockfin platform. So I owe these guys a lot. I'm grateful that they came on the show today to talk about this for this milestone here at the Lone Wolf Podcast, the end of this chapter, the 2+ year chapter. I'm honored that they came by, and I'm also honored that all of you tuned in today to watch along and drop by, throw those live chats in, ask the questions. I'm glad everyone came by today, and so we're at the end. We're at the end of this chapter. So thank you all for coming by, and I hope you'll stay tuned to see what comes next. But take care, everyone. It's the end of a chapter.